Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here and 4Ks and classic cinema. We love all these things. Today we are very excited to discuss Val Lewton, who is, a real interesting force in horror cinema of the 1940s. I think most of his stuff was in the 40s. That we remember him for anyway. And so what we have here is I'll start with really exciting news, which, you may all be aware of, and that is that we've gotten, I think this is everything now that was in the original DVD box set from the Val Lewton collection. We've gotten I Walked with a Zombie, directed by Jacques Tourneur, and The Seventh Victim, directed by Mark Robeson. Both from Criterion, both not only on Blu-ray but on 4K, making this the, 4K debuts for Val Lewton movies. Of course, he's a producer and worked with RKO and really put out some interesting films. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this release, which is very exciting, and I'm very happy with it. And we're going to just briefly go through sort of the recent history, if you will, of Val Lewton film releases on Blu-ray previous to this. But let's start here. So we have this new set, both films included. It is a 4K and Blu-ray set. And the films are short. They're just over an hour a piece, I want to say. Hour and change. And so you have both on the one 4K, and then you have a Blu-ray with some additional features, and I'll go through all that stuff. But these are really neat movies, and they're, great atmosphere. There's a really great interview with Imogen Sarah Smith, who I think is one of the premier scholars that talks about classic cinema, noir cinema. And she has some really interesting things to say, and I'm basically going to paraphrase her because I really think she's narrowed down, in essence, what it is about the appeal of Val Lewton. And she says, the things that scare us most are the ones we can't see, what's in the dark or in the shadows. The most famous innovation of the cycle of B-horror films that Val Lewton produced at RKO in the 1940s, that being, using the dark and the shadows to help people, be afraid, basically. He realized that suggesting or evoking things could be even creepier than showing them, and it was also a graceful way of dealing with small budgets and limited resources. But I think these films go much further. They are not just about what we can't see, but about what we can never fully know, something that's ungraspable, some mystery that's never solved or laid to rest. These films are infused with a profound and unsettling ambiguity. It comes from the stories and themes and characters, from the visual and sound design, and from the way that they blend genres. And I really can't top that summation. It touches on a lot of why Val Lewton's films are so timeless and still remembered passionately and continue to capture the imagination of classic film fans to this day. I discovered Val Lewton through Danny Perry and his cult movie books. And one of my favorite stories, here's Cult Movies 1, his first volume. One of my favorite stories that I heard from him direct, and he may have told it elsewhere, maybe it's even in this essay, I can't remember, because he'll do an essay and then sort of a synopsis for everything in these books. Incredible book. This is one of the, I've talked about it a bunch, but it's one of my favorite books of all time. The whole series, the Cult Movies books, the Guide for the Film Fanatic, it's all great. Anyway, when he was pitching Cult Movies, as I recall, his sample chapter that he took to his publisher was the I Walked with a Zombie review that he did, because he felt really good about it, and I think it's a fascinating review. So I'm going to read some of it here, just to give you a further appreciation for I Walked with a Zombie. He says, in 1941, financially troubled RKO assigned Val Lewton to a former assistant to David O. Selznick to produce a series of low-budget escapist horror films. But Lewton, a historian, art expert, novelist, and nephew of legendary Russian actress Nazimova, was determined to please rather than exploit the wartime audience. He told this unit, quote, "They may think I'm going to do the usual chiller stuff, which will make a quick profit, be laughed at, and be forgotten, but I'm going to make the kind of suspense movie I like." The 9 horror suspense movies Val Lewton made at RKO between 1942 and 1946, that's really something to remember, too. He made these in 4 years, with his low-budget units. And they really have, like I said, stood the test of time. So I think we have all 9 now. Yeah, I was just counting on my Blu-rays. Anyway, between 1942 and 1946 are distinguished by the intelligence and sensitivity that went into every aspect of production, from music to characterization. As one critic of the time correctly noted, there's a new kind of horror picture nowadays, snappy little spook shows full of beautiful girls and sharp dialogue, good food, and French lullabies. Lewton's films were made in direct opposition to horror classics such as Nosferatu, 1922, Frankenstein, 1931, The Mummy, 1932, Dracula, 1931, and King Kong, 1933, which scared people with frightening images. He relied on basic universal fears, darkness, sudden movements, and sounds to send chills through his audience. He was convinced that viewers could be scared to a far greater degree by what they imagined in the darkness or just off screen than by anything filmmakers could show them. This is sort of touching on what Imogen Sarah Smith was saying. The surprising financial and critical success that the Lewton series obtained is proof positive that his theories on horror, suspense, and terror were correct. And he says, I Walked with a Zombie was the second Lewton horror film and the second of 3 Lewton pictures directed by Jacques Tourneur, while its predecessor, Cat People, which we'll talk about in just a minute, that's also the other one from Criterion that's come out on Blu-ray, he has made the transition in recent years from cult film to horror classic and has become the prototype for countless films. I Walked with a Zombie has replaced it as the Lewton work that shows up most frequently at revival houses, the cult favorite of the Lewton films, a movie that defies imitation. The reason no one has attempted to make a horror film along the lines of I Walked with a Zombie is that, in truth, it's not a horror film. True, there are some eerie photography, a few suspenseful, even scary moments, a bit of voodoo, and some zombie-like creatures on the screen, but basically this film is a domestic drama set in exotic locale. Lewton made it a point to mix the familiar with the exotic. In this film, an American goes to the West Indies. It is likely that she had been a West Indian native. Lewton would have brought her to America. Yeah. The lurid title, which is also the first line of the film's narration, came from the popular Hearst Sunday Supplement article written by Inez Wallace. She wrote that she had been skeptical about the existence of zombies until she ran into one while walking across a Haitian plantation. These beings, she discovered, were not dead, quote, but their minds and vocal cords had been utterly destroyed from poison or drugs. As they could understand simple orders, which they obediently carried out, they were put to work in the fields and lived in slavery. Lewton was stuck with the RKO title. He had the title RKO had purchased for him, but he ignored Wallace's text. They may not recognize it, he told confidants, but what I'm going to make is Jane Eyre in the West Indies. True to his word, the film does contain an essential Jane Eyre plot element: a young female in a house with a man and his insane wife. I probably read too much of that, but I just love that essay. It gives a great overview of Lewton and some ideas about the film itself, and just really great stuff. So this, again, is really exciting. 4K debut for Val Lewton's films, and finishing off the 9 films that Perry mentioned there, finally all on Blu-ray now. Weirdly, from various labels, we have Criterion, we have Scream Factory, we have Warner Archive, but now we have them all. and that is very exciting for me. But really going out with a bang with these two. So in terms of the little synopses that that Criterion's website has, you're going to touch on some of the same stuff I've been talking about. Terror lives in the shadows, and a pair of mesmerizingly moody horror milestones conjured from the imagination of Val Lewton, the visionary producer-auteur who turned our fears of the unseen and the unknown into haunting excursions into existential dread. As head of RKO's B-horror movie unit during the 1940s, Lewton, working with directors such as Jacques Tourneur and Mark Robeson, brought a new sophistication to the genre by wringing chills not from conventional movie monsters, but from brooding atmosphere, suggestion, and psychosexual unease. Suffused with ritual, mysticism, and the occult, the poetically hypnotic I Walked with a Zombie and the shockingly subversive The Seventh Victim are still tantalizing dreams of death that dare to embrace darkness. So these are both from 1943. I Walk with a Zombie, producer Val Lewton and director Jacques Tourneur elevated the horror film to new heights, a poetic abstraction with this entrancing journey into the realm between life and death. When she takes a job caring for a comatose woman on a Caribbean island, a young nurse, played by Frances D., finds herself plunged into a mysterious world where the ghosts of slavery haunt the present and voodoo priests have the power to summon the living dead. Sugarcane swaying in the moonlit field, the hypnotic beat of ceremonial drums, the relentless pull toward death, and the otherworldly atmosphere of this bold reimagining of Jane Eyre is as close as studio-era Hollywood ever came to pure dream state surrealism. I love that. I love what that's saying about what he's doing, and I think it's correct. And it's one of those things where I do think the movie is just dripping with atmosphere. And it's one of those films that is just so neat to look at. And I just wanted to, verify that there's a great cinematographer named Nicholas Musaraka. Let me back up, actually, because there's a really great series on Lewton, podcast series, The Secret History of Hollywood, and that's actually a part of this release. Some excerpts from that show, which is one of the great, it's on the level of You Must Remember This, it's just a really great substantive and thorough history of, he does different, like he's done Hitchcock, he's done Universal Monsters, he's done the Thin Man series, he's done a whole bunch of all-encompassing stories. This great one about Warner Brothers, just a truly ultimately devastating story, and he does like voices, and it's just incredible storytelling. Anyway, it's just such a great story. I definitely recommend checking out that whole series if you can, because it's really something else. Okay, so I Walk with a Zombie is actually shot by J. Roy Hunt, and I think he did a bunch of other noir stuff, but that's the Crossfire is a big one. But that said, there are a bunch of these that were shot by Nicholas Musaraka, and I think Musaraka is part of the reason that these movies are so well remembered. I'm just looking to see. So he shot Cat People. He shot Out of the Past. He worked with Jacques Tourneur a lot. He shot The Seventh Victim, Spiral Staircase, Blood on the Moon. I'm a big fan of. He shot Curse of the Cat People. He shot Ghost Ship, Bedlam. So a lot of these are his. Looks like he didn't shoot The Body Snatcher. I'll get to that in a second. But he just is one of the great, like Out of the Past, one of the iconic film noirs ever made. And Jacques Tourneur, that was my way into Jacques Tourneur, was through that film. And then Curse of the Demon, Night of the Demon. Those two really got me on his wavelength. And then I think I discovered Lewton after that. And I was like, wow, here's Jacques Tourneur again, just blowing me away with these amazing films. So anyway, they just have an incredible look about them, incredible atmosphere, as I've said, and it's just really great classic film stuff. If you're a fan of Universal horror, it's not just like that. It's a little different. It's a little more sophisticated, but I think this could be your jam. And it's neat that these are coming out, in October when folks can check them out. There was just a flash sale at the Criterion site, and there will hopefully be another 50% off sale at Barnes & Noble, and I hope this is one that people will pick up, and maybe it'll be their gateway into Val Lewton, just being like, oh, this is the one. It's a double feature. It's a 4K. I can get it 50% off. Let's try it. Let's start from here. So anyway, Seventh Victim, a favorite of my podcast partner, Elric Kane's from 1943. Death is good, quote, is how producer Val Lewton summarized the message of his films, a credo that received its most explicit expression in the strikingly nihilistic shocker, the first film directed by regular Lewton editor Mark Robeson. So he started as an editor and he directed this film, which is a pretty great debut film. Kim Hunter makes her film debut as a young boarding school student who, in search of her missing sister, proto-goth icon Jean Brooks, who's on the cover there, travels to New York's bohemian Greenwich Village, where she uncovers a sinister shadow world of devil worshippers and murder. And what about that mysterious room furnished with nothing but a chair and a hangman's noose? That's an incredibly memorable bit of business. With its daring treatment of depression and queerness, The Seventh Victim has haunted the margins of cinema for decades, its radical bleakness undiminished by time. That's well said. Just really neat to have these two films. I just can't express how excited I am about it. And I don't want to talk about them too much specifically because I really do want folks to just check them out. Just take a risk on this. I'm just looking at the features here. The booklet. And it includes essays by critics Chris Fujiwara and Lucy Sante. Lucy Sante does a piece on The Seventh Victim, and I Walk with a Zombie, Chris Fujiwara covers. Just a brief reading from Lucy Sante, now that we're talking about Seventh Victim. Produced by Val Lewton and directed by Mark Robeson, is a delicate, muted, atmospheric horror film that is somehow more than the sum of its parts. A certain devil-may-care approach to consistency and coherence, along with an artful job of backlot pasteboard illusionism. Both things attribute to the strict $150,000 budget cap, actually assists in creating the aura of anxiety and indeterminacy that makes it a horror picture despite the low number of shocks and maybe a teaspoon's worth of blood. This blend of artistry and happenstance results in a film whose impacts seems to bypass the intellect entirely. It may have been even better as a silent, except for the subliminal power of its sound effects. And that's something I want to mention too, is that Lewton really believed in that, what is in the darkness mentality, and accentuated that by using sound. And I'll talk about Cat People in a second, but that was one of the first Lewton movies I saw that had this sound bus, this moment where a character is walking and literally a bus's air brakes slam on, and it was like one of the earliest jump scares. I feel like I've talked about that on the channel before, but there's a ton of great sound design and sound use in these films that helps fill out and accentuate the things going on in the darkness that you can't see, and allows your imagination to grab on just a little bit more to something with that sound. Anyway, let me just talk about these features really quick on this disc, and then we'll zip through the rest of the movies. So on the 4K, we have a commentary track on I Walk with a Zombie, recorded in 2005 by Kim Newman and Stephen Jones, two of my favorite commentators ever, and especially on this sort of film. It is like 100% their wheelhouse, and they always knock it out of the park. And so here's another part. This is an alternate audio track. The Secret History of Hollywood, presented as an alternate audio track over the film, are excerpts of Adam Roche's 11-part series about Val Lewton from his classic movie podcast, The Secret History of Hollywood, which features stories about the production of I Walk with a Zombie. So they've gone in and pulled out those sections and made that sort of its own audio track, which is great. On The Seventh Victim, there's a commentary track from 2005 recorded by Steve Haberman. I think these may be coming from the DVDs, the Warner Brothers DVDs. But this also includes a Secret History of Hollywood audio excerpt, which features stories about the production of The Seventh Victim specifically. And they are great compliments. And I hope, like I said, will whet your appetite to want to watch. Listen to the entire Lewton, podcast that he did. So good. And then on the Blu-ray itself, we get those commentaries, those audio tracks, and then we get this Imogen Sarah Smith on Val Lewton, which is 47 minutes, talking about both films, talking about Lewton in general, and just fantastic. She is just always continuing to impress me and educate me, and I'm open to it. Included here also is Shadows in the Dark, the Val Lewton Legacy. Now just keep in mind that title because there's actually multiple Val Lewton docs, and they're included. There's another one included on another disc, but this is from 2005, and it's a documentary all about producer Val Lewton, narrated by James Cromwell, featuring William Friedkin, Steve Jones, Steve Haberman, Joe Dante, Guillermo del Toro, Kim Newman, Val E. Lewton, I think his grandson, I can't remember, Drew Casper, Rick Jewell, Harlan Ellison, Ramsey Campbell, George A. Romero, John Landis, Mick Garris, Richard Matheson, Neil Gaiman, Robert Wise, and Sarah Karloff. So it's got a great group of people talking about Lewton in the context of these films and, their relatives, how they might have been involved in the films. Really neat doc to have here. Then we have something called The Origins of the Zombie from Haiti to the U.S., and that's about 12 and a half minutes. The Lewton doc is about 54 minutes. This zombie thing is excerpts from the PBS Digital Studios series Monstrum, which explores the West African and Haitian origins of voodoo and zombification. The show is presented by Dr. Emily Zarka, whose research explores the roles of desire and knowledge dissemination in portrayals of undead characters produced during the 18th and 19th century. The Monstrum series can be viewed on pbs.org. And then we have something, Gene Brooks and Tom Conway. These are audio excerpts from Madame Roche's, the Secret History of Hollywood, taking a fascinating look at the lives of these two actors. Gene Brooks, who plays in The Seventh Victim, and Tom Conway, who played Paul Holland in I Walked with a Zombie, and Dr. Lewis Judd in The Seventh Victim, as well as Cat People. He plays the same character, and I think there was some note about one must come before. Anyway, I won't spoil that. But yeah, so you get a little bit on those two actors and their lives, and that's part of what that podcast does, is go deep on not just the productions, but the actors, and just incredible stuff. Truly one of the great podcasts ever. Not exaggerating. So that's this disc, and it's great, and it's one of my favorites of the year, and it's highly recommended. I can't recommend it enough. Now, in terms of the other stuff, we'll go through it quickly, but we have Cat People that came out from Criterion. Beautiful disc. This has Val Lewton, The Man in the Shadows, which is a 2008 feature-length documentary that explores the life and career of the Hollywood producer, plus an interview with Jacques Turner from 1979, new interview with cinematographer John Bailey about the look of the film. And this is one of the key Val Lewton texts. Like, it just has, again, that sense of, something in the dark. And there's incredible scenes, one in a pool with a woman surrounded by potentially a big cat that we don't really see because the way that the scene is lit, the edges of the pool are all dark. Incredibly memorable. Sound design is great. Truly a classic, So Criterion's really done right by him in putting out 3 of his movies. Another big favorite for me is The Body Snatcher. This came out from Scream Factory. One of my favorite Boris Karloff roles, and he plays the title role in this adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson's The Body Snatcher. This is directed by Robert Wise, who would go on to do West Side Story and Sound of Music, and an editor in his own right. A doctor, Henry Daniel, from The Four Skulls of Jonathan Drake, which actually I just saw projected in 35mm as part of the New Beverly Horror Show this year. And it was really neat to get to see that with a crowd. And he's very effective in that film. Very creepy. He needs cadavers for medical students, and Karloff is willing to provide them one way or another. We know what that means. This film also features wonderful supporting performance by fellow horror icon Bela Lugosi, which is another reason I love it. But it sort of is like a pact with the devil of sorts. Like Karloff plays Tali Devlin, I think, and he's just very disreputable character. And as I said, begins to ingratiate himself with the doctor in such a way that it becomes almost blackmail-y, and it's very difficult to disentangle himself from it. And it's just an incredible performance from Karloff. Like I said, one of my favorites. And I love the look. I love the feel of this. It's a great Blu-ray release. And I got a commentary from Steve Haberman and director Robert Wise. Shadows in the Dark, the Val Lewton legacy is included on this as well. Just a really great disc. One of my favorites of their releases. Then we have Curse of the Cat People, which is a quasi sort of sequel to Cat People and is a little gentler in terms of the horror, but it's still great atmosphere. And it's dealing with Sleepy Hollow, if I recall, or at least filled with the wonderful atmosphere and fine mood fantasy. This continuation of 1942's Cat People follows Oliver Reed, that's Kent Smith, now remarried, living in idyllic Tarrytown, New York, and the father of 6-year-old Amy. When Amy becomes withdrawn and speaks of consorting with a new, quote, friend, Oliver worries that she may be under the influence of the spirit of his first wife, who is part of Simone from Cat People. Is it just Amy's imagination that has manifested the enigmatic Irina, who long believed herself to be descended from a race of cat people? Director Gunther V. Frisch and Robert Wise, making his directorial debut, co-helm this Gothic-laced mix of fantasy and fright. There's a great story about, just the story of the production, why Robert Wise took over in that Secret History of Hollywood podcast. But yeah, it's got a great story of Sleepy Hollow, and it's just a great October Halloween kind of movie. It's just really neat. There's having the child in it just gives it this extra sense of magical wonder that I can't explain, but I really, really like this one. Then we have The Leopard Man. This is another one that I dig a lot. Also directed by Jacques Tourneur. This is a favorite of, William Friedkin. Yeah, he's included. There's 2 commentaries. Constantine Nasir and Friedkin himself has a commentary on this disc. Is it man, beast, or both? A string of savage maulings and murders. An escaped leopard provides the catalyst for a foray into fear, in which a cemetery is the rendezvous for death and love, and a closed door heightens rather than hides the horror of a young girl's fate. The Leopard Man once again teams Val Lewton, director Jacques Tourneur. This thriller stars Dennis O'Keefe, Margot, and Jean Brooks from The Seventh Victim. Has a really great sequence where a little girl is sent out by her mother to get some cornmeal, I think, and she has to come back, and there's an incredible, again, like the bus in Cat People, a jump scare with a bridge. And I remember I've told this story before, but I showed my wife this movie when we were dating, and she was drinking a soda, I think, and I want to say that the jump scare was so good that she threw it on herself, and I think maybe a little bit on me. And it was just one of those where I was like, wow, this movie still got it. That's incredible. I love that. So it's neat that a movie can have that kind of effect. Also, it's kind of an animal attack thing, kind of supernatural. So it checks a lot of boxes for me. Just a couple more. These are a little bit lesser, but still interesting. These are the Warner Archive releases. We have The Ghost Ship and Bedlam. This double feature disc brings together two of producer Val Lewton's classic RKO horror films. 1943's Ghost Ship. Tom Marion, Russell Wade, the young third mate on a freighter bound for Patagonia, witnesses the murder of a crewman by the ship's captain, Will Stone, played by Richard Dix. Marion realizes Stone is going insane, but the rest of the crew won't believe him, or he may be the mad captain's next victim. So that's Ghost Ship. Boris Karloff reunites with Lewton for a third and final time in 1946's Bedlam, set in 1761. We have Isle of the Dead, which is the second one, so I kind of went out of order, but gives an unforgettable high society. Let's see, overseer. As a doomed overseer who fawns on high society benefactors while ruling his mentally disturbed inmates with an iron fist, newly restored from the original Night Negatives. This has a commentary on Bedlam by Tom Weaver, but a very nice double feature. And then lastly, we have Isle of the Dead. Once you visit the Isle of Dead, there's no hope of returning to the land of the living. A small island off the coast of Greece holds a secret so dreadful that once you step onto its soil, you must remain there forever. General Farides, that's Karloff, is one such visitor. Going to the island to honor the grave of his late wife, Farides discovers that it's held in the grip of terrifying plague, a sickness that enters the victim's mind and drives them insane. Farides leads the fight against the plague, but then falls prey to it himself. In his delirium, he believes that a woman named Thea, Ellen Drew, is Vorvalika, a vampire responsible for their deaths. Insanity runs rampant, and grave robbery, premature burial, and ghastly vampires are unspeakable horrors that await on the Isle of the Dead. And this has a Steve Haberman commentary as well. So again, very exciting to have all of the Lewton movies now available in one Blu-ray or another from various sources. And I'm just really excited to have these. Like, it's a kind of a ragtag box set, if you will. But again, can't recommend enough that you check out I Walk with a Zombie and The Seventh Victim, two of the Val Lewton greats that are, debuting on 4K and Blu-ray through Criterion. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.